As Elder Hendricks would have said, today's topic is going to be an interesting one. Okay, I'll just continue. Capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, and it was formerly called judicial homicide. It is a state-sanctioned killing of a person as punishment for actual or supposed misconduct. Supposed. Brethren, today we'll look from a biblical perspective in terms of what does capital punishment mean and what does it say. I thank the leadership, as always, for giving me the privilege to address God's people. For the persons who are online, I hope your time with us is both enlightening and also enjoyable. And as always, visitors, thank you for joining us, and I hope that today's presentation will prompt you to come back and to have further discussion. In recent times, Jamaica's leaders have been calling for the death penalty. In 2023, although not Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, Mark Golding, says he was willing to discuss the death penalty. In the same year, Andrew Holness called for the death penalty as a sign of public frustration with the criminality that exists in Jamaica. More recently, the DPP, Paula Llewellyn, or former DPP I should say, she wanted to seek the death penalty for the triggerman in the murder of a woman and her child. And I think the case is related to Philip Paulwell, one of his, I want to say this correctly, how do I say that diplomatically? The mother of his child killed another woman or conspired to kill another woman. The triggerman, DPP said death penalty. Additionally, we've seen other calls by the public in the Observer to utilize the death penalty. Enough is enough. And the question we want to really answer today is this godly? Is this a godly call? The United Nations Human Rights Council, in March 2016, two non-government groups commented about Jamaica and the death penalty. The Advocates for Human Rights and the other group, the Greater Caribbean for Life. And they say despite the de facto moratorium on execution since 1988, public support for the practice remains very high in Jamaica. And they have a fear that there's a risk that the Jamaican authorities will resume hangings. Now I should also point out that in Jamaica today, the death penalty is legal by hanging. And it's reserved for murder, the heinous crime of murder. And 1988 was the last time that somebody was hanged in Jamaica convicted of murder. Yes, and some of us might be too young. In a BBC report, in 2007, there was a UN vote on a moratorium on the death penalty. 99 countries voted that the world should put the death penalty on pause. To no surprise, Jamaica was one of the strongest opponents to putting it on pause. 99 countries voted for the suspension. 52 countries voted against, and 33 abstained, which shows that the world is divided at that time. The Jamaican Parliament placed a moratorium on the death penalty until 2009, when it then elapsed. And we can see more and more in the news that the DPP has been calling for the death penalty for certain crimes. Now, before I go on to the presentation, I want to ask, what is a moratorium? Do we know what that is? A moratorium. A stay of execution. So, for example, when we're in COVID and a lot of us had car loans or house loans, the banks came out and said that they would give us a moratorium on payments. Means that the payment was delayed in terms of when it was due. Don't mean that the payment went away though. It still has to be paid. It's just that you don't have to pay it right now. Right? Everybody's clear. Moratorium, a stay on execution. His Excellency Brian Wallace, United Nations General Assembly of the United Nations Third Committee, on a comment when they were trying to decide on the amendment to a draft resolution on this moratorium, this is in 2022, he says, we note and due respect that some member states have implemented a moratorium on or abolished the use of the death penalty. Jamaica, on the other hand, is grappling with an epidemic of crime and violence that threatens the safety and security of those who are most vulnerable, as well as national efforts towards the achievement of sustainable development. So I wanted to take note that to the world, our authorities in Jamaica see the death penalty as one of the tools that are in their toolkit to reduce crime. It's an option. Psychologically, we have to ask the question, why is this so? Why would the death penalty be a tool that can be used? And before I get into today's objective, I just wanted to ask a general question. Do we believe that there is any sin that is greater than another?
Yes.
Some people say yes.
Yes, but no.
Some people say no.
No, yes.
Some people say no.
No, yes.
Is there anything greater than another? So we seem divided. Some people say yes. Some people say no. And I guess the question is context. What do we mean by greater, right? And we'll get into what does greater mean. So today's objectives, we want to examine death penalty from a biblical perspective. We want to identify sins that resulted in the death penalty. We want to consider the spiritual implications of each type of sin. And we want to discuss how the death penalty is still applicable today, especially for Christians. So here's my thesis, generally speaking. There's a grave consequence of sin. And there are certain behaviors that don't just destroy the individual, but it also destroys families, by extension, communities, and if we expand it further, ultimately nations and countries. But there's a hierarchical effect of how sin operates, starting from an individual, expanding to a wider community, and then it goes across the world. In ancient Israel, certain behaviors were seen as so harmful that God assigned the death penalty to these types of sins. And they weren't just random in terms of, you get up today, you fry an egg, no, death penalty. The sins were assigned and it was designed to protect the community from moral decay. And as we look at the world today, moving more and more away from God's laws, we can see that there's obviously an increase in moral decay. When you look on social media, I don't remember what wrong or right looks like anymore. Things that I thought that were outlandish 20 years ago seem like the norm today. And the world is more accepting of it. Now, I want to start off by taking us to the first instance of the death penalty. And we can go all the way back to Genesis 2, in the garden where we saw Adam and Eve. Here in Genesis 2, verses 15 to 17, it says, the Lord took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in that day you eat of it, you shall surely die. And the word there is muth, H4191. It means to die, to kill, have one executed, a penalty, being put to death. So we know that there was a significance or consequence ascribed to sin. It did not result in immediate physical death. Adam and Eve did not die immediately. However, that promise of sure death still stood. It introduced the concept of death as a consequence of sin. And also, it made it both a physical and a spiritual reality. There is more death beyond the grave. We see in Matthew 10:28, Jesus says, do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. What that simply means for us is that although your body can physically die, there is a greater death that we should be more fearful of. So when we look at what we have in this world, if we leave it behind, it should be of no consequence to us. What really matters is, will we be spiritually dead in the end? Now, as we move on with analysis of the death penalty, I move to Genesis 4. And we see the first instance of death occurring in terms of murder. Here we have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and God says this, Cain says this to God in response. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive, and I wander on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. So there almost seems to be this sense of justice that if somebody kills somebody, you should kill them back, As a matter of fact, if you go into the inner cities, this is one of the things that cause so much crime now. There are two sides of a community that are in war, so to speak. One person kills the person from the other side. There's a sense of justice that is not given. The governments of this world has failed us in terms of how do you actually catch the criminal and prosecute them. Because there's a lack of justice, the only recourse that people think they have is to kill back somebody from the other side. And then in this time, if they can't catch you, they will try and kill your family. And in certain times, they will kill you and your entire family to ensure that even your children will not come back at a later time. And a lot of times, if you go into the inner city and you hear about how the violence is being perpetrated, it's years on years, one side killing somebody, somebody killing back somebody, and the cycle continues. Recently they killed my cousin. And
Careful now.
Yeah. Not thought about it, but
Okay.
yeah, they killed my cousin about 4 weeks ago. And it was very hard to deal with because I know in my mind that the police are not going to catch who did it. I know. It's just been a long-standing thing. But what I found interesting was when I was talking to my family members in that area, they were very tense because my cousin has a brother. And the rumors were that my other cousin, killed back somebody on their side. Don't know if it's true or not, nobody knows. But because that's just the nature of how these stories go. And the news that was coming out is, well, family for family. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy. You can't even prove if somebody did kill somebody, but all of a sudden, everybody's family is now implicated and everybody has to walk on the road very scared. But it's because there is a sense of justice that has not been fulfilled. And people feel like this is the recourse that they have. The same thing is being demonstrated in Genesis 4. So this is from the earliest of times. If I kill somebody, somebody might want to kill me back. Now here's the issue. Cain introduced murder. We read later in Genesis 4:23 to 24 about his great-great-great-great-great-grandson Lamech. And Lamech does something that is quite interesting in terms of how sin spreads. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 70 sevenfold. Now that was very boastful, because what it now shows is that killing was almost becoming normal, that somebody could see an unfortunate incident in terms of Cain and Abel. God is the one who put the protection on Cain to say, listen, if somebody kill you and continues this cycle of violence, then it will be sevenfold. Lamech goes, if somebody touch me, 77-fold. It's almost like it was very boastful, it was very arrogant. And therefore we started to see sin spiral in the community. And we end up with Noah's flood, ultimately. We continue in Genesis 9:6. A message is communicated to Noah. When the flood subsides, God is communicating to Noah the things that should be done, the things to be careful of. It says, whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed. So therefore the death penalty is now being very clear. If you kill somebody, your blood should also be shed. But here is the interesting part that we need to look beyond the physical. It gives a reason. It says, for God made man in his own image. Now we can see sin, and we can say, okay, that's bad. We know that's bad. But is there a spiritual reason behind? Is there a deeper message behind? So here are my pointers. Killing a man is like killing the image of God. God made man in his image. God intends for man to become a part of his family in terms of God beings or spiritual beings. And by killing someone, you are taking a life of a family member of God or a potential family member. Additionally, if man is made in God's image, then therefore we need to see every single life as precious and a reflection of God himself. And if you have it in your mind to kill something that is made in the image of God, then you yourself almost hate God. And therefore, it is fitting that if you have that mindset, then your life should be taken. And we can therefore see that there are spiritual reasons now being attached to these death penalties. Look past the sin that is there. And that's what I really want us to focus on and expand on today. Now in Exodus 21:12 to 14, it says, continuing on murder, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. That means that it was not your intention. So it goes back to what is your mindset, what is your intention, and what is in your heart. Someone can die, but did you purposely intend on taking life? And if you intended, then you forfeit your own life. Verse 14, but if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. And you have the other references. You can look at Leviticus 24, 17 to 21, Numbers 35, 16 to 21, Numbers 35, 30 to 31. Now, before I move on to the next section, it's important to note how the death penalty works. It says here in Numbers 35:30, there are some parameters. If anyone kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the evidence of witnesses. But no one person shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. That's how serious the death penalty was. You couldn't just get up and say, that person did something, and all of a sudden the person died. You needed to ensure that you had more than one witness. And Deuteronomy 19:15 says it very clearly. A single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime or for any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. Only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. This is very, very important. Because in the larger scheme in terms of what God is doing, witnesses are very important. For example, Jesus says, the Father testifies about me, the Word testifies about me, the Scriptures testify about me. And he also told his disciples, go and be my witnesses to the world, so that the world will know that he is who he is. Now today, I'm going to share with you a list that I compiled. 28 circumstances which led to the death penalty. I won't have the opportunity to go through all of them, but I picked out some of the most salient ones to try and get us to understand the significance behind each one of these sins. So far, I've identified 28 circumstances which have led to the death penalty. I've categorized them in 4 main categories. Crimes against another person. And there's 5 that I found here. And this might not be exhaustive. There might be some that I've missed. But for right now, I found 28. 4 direct sins that led to the death penalty against someone. And one of them was indirect. That's approximately 17.8% of the sins. Crimes against authority. Rebelliousness. I found another 5. Sexual sins. 9. 32.4% out of the whole. And equally, religious or spiritual offenses, another 9, which shows us that sexual sins was a very serious thing. A lot of them led to the death penalty, and we're going to examine some of them. Now, first, let's start off with crimes against a person. I found 5. I'm not going to go through every single one, but we'll explore what they mean and what are some of the conclusions that we can draw. So murder we obviously looked at. You should not murder. Man is created in God's own image. Taking somebody's life is basically killing God himself because it's an image, right? Kidnapping. If you were found taking somebody, a brother, and you sold that person into slavery, you would be killed. And I found it very strange, right, reading this, because when you look at transatlantic slavery, especially what happened to Jamaica, there are a lot of Christians who had slaves. And it was ironic that the Bible that they profess literally says if you took somebody by force and sold him into slavery, you would die. But yet they were so comfortable doing it. And once again, it goes back to when you say love your neighbor like you love yourself, there's a significant reason. It's because your neighbor is in the image of God. And ultimately, your neighbor is also going to become a part of the family of God. Those are very basic principles that have far-reaching implications. But I wonder how much of us are actually digesting that and making that a part of how we behave, how we treat each other. Husband and wives, same thing. Although it's your husband, ultimately, he's in the image of God as well. Husbands to wives, same thing. Your wife is ultimately in the image of God as well. Number 3, causing the life of the loss of a baby's life when 2 men are fighting. So if 2 men were fighting, there's a pregnant woman. The 2 men that are fighting, one of them strikes the woman in the fight. The baby's life has been lost. The life of the person who struck her is required. Once again, life has been lost. 4, a man's ox kills someone. I'll come into that with a man whose ox kills after previously goring other people. That means that you had an ox. The ox killed somebody. Okay, first time, you never did know. Second time, kind of feel like you did know. Third time, no man, I did if you did. You're taking it too far now. Yeah, no, you're taking it too far. And although it says ox, it can extend itself to dangerous dogs, anything that causes a potential loss of life. And actually, this one is really what America is very divided about when the upcoming elections are being spoken of, right? So if we think about abortion rights, the Republicans, traditionally more conservative, have been against abortion, whereas the Democrats have been traditionally, the woman should have rights over her body and decide what she does. The state should not intervene. And the question at the base of it is abortion murder? Is it a taking of a life? No, I'm not here to weigh in. I'm just explaining that is the crux of it, right? So this is real. Although they say abortion, at the end of it, what they're saying is that murder is happening. And therefore, murder should not be allowed to happen. Don't even give anybody the right to do that. And of course, there are more complex issues. Suppose it is that, the mother and the child are both at risk or are going to die. And you had to choose. What do you do? Those are more nuanced situations. But as I said, at the base of it, is it murder? That's the question. Now, this fifth one is very interesting. A false witness. A false witness can lead to the death penalty. And as I explained before, God's system of justice is premised on true witnesses. You have to have true witnesses. Now, here's how a false witness led to death. It says here, the judges shall inquire diligently in Deuteronomy 19. And if the witness is a false witness and has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him as he had meant to do to his brother. So shall you purge the evil from your midst. Now, let us be very clear. What that meant is, for example, let's look at the Vibes Cartel case. There's a witness that has said, this man conspired with his friends and they killed somebody. Mind you, it's one witness. One witness. Now, here's the interesting thing. If it is that Sir Adidja Palmer is guilty and life was taken, it means he should die. Fair?
Yes.
Is that fair? Sister Hendricks, is that fair? Why so quiet? Is that fair? If he took the man's life, he should die. You remain diplomatic. Okay, no problem. Now here's the other side. If the witness is false and he was trying to accuse Adidja Palmer and his co-conspirators falsely, then it means that the witness should die. Somebody has to dead. Somebody has to die. And the fact of the matter is God is the one that's implementing this. Somebody has to die. It was a very serious thing. And once again, it's because of what man is. Man is created in the image of God. We can't take death so lightly. In Jamaica, we have now become numb. We hear so much people are dying and, it's just another week. It's unfortunate. We shouldn't be so numb. And once again, although this one is indirect in terms of, if I went to Sister Noreen and I said to her, say, I see Dacres taking some mango off somebody's tree. And his liar telling. it wouldn't necessarily end up in death for him. He would have to pay back 5 times or 4 times, right? So I should pay back. So that didn't lead to death. But in this specific circumstance, it would. And God's plan and his system of justice depends on true and valid witnesses. That's why we're all here, by the way. We are witnesses that God exists and his way is true, and we should be telling it to the world. We are actually witnesses. Yeah. So if we are bearing false witness, we're defeating ourselves and our purpose. Fine. Crimes against authority, next category, 5 of them. Number 1, a disobedient son. The death penalty for a disobedient son. Now I could pause here and say, all the children, you need to listen to your parents. No. A rebellious son, a disobedient son. The death penalty. If you were a rebellious mind, you could not be controlled. I could pause here and say the children, but here's the issue. It's not just children are sons. Adult males are sons too. Brother Parks, you're a son. So then, no, hold on, so we're coming to it. No, that's a very good question. Why is it that it specifically said son and not daughters? Anybody have any?
Daughters are not disobedient.
Not what? Women are normally what? No. Whitaker says no. Women are normally obedient. No, hold on. I don't want us to just look at the sin and say we're not going to be rebellious sons. There are deeper spiritual implications of why. Right? Why would it highlight sons? There's a reason. It's because of headship and authority and what the sons can represent. The sons became head of households, of clans. And if they did not set the right thing for their family, you would have chaos in the society. The responsibility was on them because they represented God in their family. They are the head. You can't have the rebellion. So there are specific things that we can look at where the death penalty is assigned and say, okay, there's something deeper that we need to understand because this has implications for the family structure. And it follows. A child who strikes a father or a mother, death penalty. No, you can't imagine in Jamaica, you hear in the news. Children kill their parents. Back talk. Box them mother in the house. Death penalty. Children who curse their father and their mother. Death penalty. No, hold on. Can you imagine if Jamaica was really supposed to say, all right, let us take the Bible. Forget this murder alone charge. Yeah. We're going to roll out the full suite of everything that we find in there. Can you imagine what would happen in society? Can you imagine that? No, the 7-year-old who was found with the machine gun. Where would I go? Oh, he would go. We don't know if he innocent took it. We don't know if this is and listen, don't make age fool you these days, Don't make age fool you these days. When I reach 12 and 13, listen, I know of some cases. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the music, a lot of time they will talk about send a child to take a 3 points and you never even see it coming. Because they're selling the children to go and do the killing. Don't take it light. Crimes against authority. Number 4. Anyone who failed to abide by a decision of the court, if you got a decision, got a judgment, and you decide that you're not going to follow it because you feel like you never get justice, death penalty. What about even in the church? If the elders decide on something and tell you, say, this is the decision, and we decide that we never feel like, say, Elder Ramakon, give us a fair judgment, and we will continue same way. Would that be fair? Death penalty first? Number 5. Any non-Levite who tried to set up or take down the tabernacle. And that really spoke about know your role. This is not your responsibility. Don't go after something that is not yours. That's not your role. Don't take it up. But death penalty, crimes against authority.
Yes, good one, good sir.
Now, the next section, death penalty, sexual sins.
Yes, here we go.
9 of them. Adultery, bestiality. A man who had sex with his father's wife. A man with his daughter-in-law. Homosexuality.
Only one we said.
A man who marries a woman and her mother together. Burned in the fire. A daughter of a priest who became a prostitute. A woman having sex before marriage. We're going to get into that one. Rape. We're going to get into that one too. Because it's going to be very shocking for some of you. These nuances in the Bible.
Yes.
Some of us will love God and his ways and want to read it. Adultery. And there's some controversy around this one, but I'm going to try my best to be as balanced as I can. If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, Leviticus 20:10, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. It's repeated in Deuteronomy 22 to 24. If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die. The man who lay with the woman and the woman, so shall you purge the evil from Israel. Is it? Wait till my 2 slide. Now there are some points about adultery that I need us to consider. In that time, when adultery was being defined, adultery was only committed against the husband. It was never considered committed against the wife. I'm going to explain why in my next slide. Adultery was committed when a married woman was involved. And adultery can be considered a physical form of idolatry. And here's why. Jeremiah 3 says, if a man divorces his wife, and this is God talking to Israel, if a man divorces his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her? Talking about Israel and their adulterous, sinful behavior. Would not the land be greatly polluted? You have played the whore with many lovers, and you would return to me, declares the Lord. Linking idolatry to adultery. Hosea 3. And the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love cakes of raisins. Once again showing that God considers himself married to Israel. And there's a deeper understanding that we need to capture. Now, before I go on, I want to make something very clear. There's a reason that the death penalty is assigned to adultery. And I hope the moderator protects me in the question and answer section. But emotionally, we need to understand what the deeper reason is that the death penalty is assigned to adultery. It is not about flowers or feelings or providing money. There's a deeper spiritual understanding of what adultery means. And as married people in the church, you ought to understand this, both men and women. It has very serious implications. Now what I've done is I've created a diagram that tries to articulate what I mean. Now in the marriage covenant between God and Israel, God plays the husband. The church plays the bride. Additionally, in a marriage, a physical marriage, you have the husband playing Jesus and the wife playing the bride or the church. And that relationship is what we try to represent when we get married. Now here is the thing. You've been doing the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20 verse 7. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Understand this. Taking the name. Taking the name means God's ownership over you. And therefore, when you take on the name, you should not represent who he is badly. Everybody's following that, right? Okay. In marriage, the husband and the wife does the same thing. The wife takes the name of the husband because the wife is joining the husband's household. And therefore, the wife should not represent the husband badly. Does that make sense? Yes. All right. So there's something about taking... So for example, when we're getting married and somebody says, who gives this woman away? It's a very serious question, you know. Really? People gloss over that. It's just a part of the ceremony. When it says, who gives this woman away, it is because they're transferring authority from the father's household to the husband's household. And you're literally playing out this relationship between God and his church. When you join God's covenant, you take his name and you're transferred into his household. Now, we've been having this discussion about, you know, a very ill which is coming. But anyways, the deeper thing that men and women should know and why the death penalty is so important. The husband's role is to protect and provide and love the wife, just like how God does it. Before we have this conversation about if man can have two wives or not, know your role as a man. That's the first thing. Before you take up, no. Just know your role as a man. Protect and provide. If you're not doing that, not even bother enter the conversation about two. Don't even bother. It don't make no sense. That is what the focus is. And in our society, men have abused their role. We have absentee fathers. We have men who just go around the place and they have no responsibility to their families. And it's ungodly. And that's why in the Bible, in the New Testament, it says, if a man does not take care of family, God will block him prayers. There's a reason. Because he is not representing his role correctly. And equally, I would ask the woman, in terms of your covenant, despite if you're miserable or not, would you agree that a man should still provide and protect you no matter what? Yeah, raise your hand if you believe that. 100%. Right? No, equally. If I was supposed to say, woman, no matter what your husband do, you should obey and respect him. Where's the president of Palm? You have deeper problems than what I'm preaching in a sermon. There needs to be a sermon about this. But listen, but now this is where adultery and the death penalty comes in and why it's so important, right? Because here's what happens. When the church goes after another god, it is considered idolatry. Yes. When the wife goes after another man, adultery. That is when it's called adultery, because it represents idolatry and what your roles are. And therefore, what God is saying is that when this happens, the death penalty has to be applied. Because what you're promoting is idolatry. You're doing it because you feel, inside, but spiritually, what you're doing is saying to the people around you that it's okay not to follow God. You can go after other things. That's the basis now. We're getting to the basis. So it's not just a physical sin. It's a spiritual thing that is happening. Very good point. And that's why the death penalty, when it comes to sexual sin, that's why it's so serious. It's a very serious thing, I agree.
Because I'm not.
And our society is very impacted because of the music
Yes.
and because of what is going on, what is now acceptable. Additionally, when it comes to rape, and this is where, as the Church of God, we need to be more nuanced and go into our Bibles. Rape. Now, a lot of times when you talk to Christians, they will just say, yeah, man, rape, death penalty, straight. Should happen. But I want to point out, the death penalty for rape only happened in one specific situation. It is only when the woman was betrothed or technically married to a man. That is the only time that the death penalty was applied. And the reason is, going back to what we said previously, because that relationship is being violated. Other apart from that, the death penalty was not applied. The man will just have to marry the lady and he can't divorce her. He has to bear that responsibility for the rest of his life. But it's only in this case that the death penalty is applied, and it goes back to what marriage is. It's because somebody is violating a covenant that has been made. So I want to make that very clear. It's very nuanced and it comes back to sin. Well, women having sex before marriage, I can't go through all of them, so I'm trying to go through as much as I can. Sex before marriage. In Deuteronomy 20 to 21, it says, and this was talking about if somebody was married and the husband finds out that his wife is not a virgin, and he comes and he says to the elders, this woman that I've married has been having sex outside of marriage. Death penalty. Death penalty. Here are the implications for us. Young men, when it is that you think to yourself that you're going to try and trick a girl or try to have inappropriate sexual relations with her, you are sentencing her to death if you don't take up your responsibility. Because if a next man goes and marries her, what you're doing now is basically making her be defiled. And the marriage covenant starts to get very shady, very grey, mucky, intertwined, and God does not like that. So if young women, before you hear a man talk about, oh, I love you, and no, if he really love you, he would not put you in that circumstance. And that's something that we need to talk more about in this society. It's gone on for too long. And I want to say, the reason that the burden was placed on the woman was because it is the only party that you can detect whether virginity is still present or not. So it's not a matter of we're trying to be unfair, just biologically. That's how it worked out. But there's a responsibility on men not to defile women and not to place them in this situation that they could potentially be killed. Homosexuality. Another serious one. And why this one is serious is because we see the European Union, we see the United States promoting that this should be okay and acceptable. It's fine, if you use an A word and you say acceptable. That's okay. Jesus come, we don't have to kill anybody. That's fine. We don't believe you should kill them because we're all sinners, right? But when you change the A word from make it acceptable to affirm, that's a different thing. Should I affirm you to say that this is good behavior? This is perfectly acceptable. That's a different A word. Leave me at the acceptable. All right, you're not supposed to die. We're fine. But to change it to affirm, this is now where moral decay is going to spread even further. It was already bad before, but now it's going to get even worse. And the reason behind this is because God had a plan from Genesis. When he implemented the physical family, he was representing the spiritual family. God's plan is to extend the family of God. And by doing that, he put man and woman so that they could procreate and have children. It is the same thing that God is doing with his family. Therefore, anything that diverts away from that, death penalty. And I'm just saying this is from the Bible, it's from the Old Testament. Ray is not saying that anybody should be killed. So please, when you click me in the video and you circulate it, just include this part as well. Ensure that you know that I'm just saying this is what the Bible says. Now, in our society, it's more lenient towards lesbians than gays. Generally speaking. They're more okay with lesbians than they are with two men. That's just facts. That's just reality. They are. But Paul in Romans 1:26-27 notes that it's really unnatural for two women to also be together. So it's not that the women are excluded from moral behavior. But once again, it goes back to something deeper. It is about the consummation. And, the parts that are for man and woman to consummate the marriage represents what God is going to do when he brings the family together. So the consummation is really what most people focus on. But the moral behavior is still wrong in terms of God's eyes. And Paul makes that very clear in Romans 1:26-27. The death penalty for religious or spiritual offenses, 9 of them. Idolatry, breaking the Sabbath, a sorceress, a medium or a spiritist, false prophet, a family or a friend who entices you to go after other gods, anyone in a town that entices people to go after other gods, a blasphemer, child sacrifice. Now, there are some of them that are very obvious. Idolatry is very obvious. You're going after another god outside of God. This was very clear, right? I don't need to spend time on that. And I'll share a story with you. I once had a family member who said to me that they went to a medium and that they spoke to some dead persons. And the dead persons were telling me about my family. About Reese, about when I was going to die. And they were like, they were telling me some very deep personal things. And I stood back and, the one thing I heard is, when I was going to die, what? What do you mean? And I was almost tempted to say, when did they say? But the person goes on to say to me, I can schedule a meeting for you to go and talk. I was just like, what? Is that you want me then? No. As a matter of fact, don't even get me upset. Like I feel like I would just kill them too. Don't get me upset. But it dawned on me that our society is almost very comfortable. Guard rings, talking about how much demons are in there. Go to the opium man. People going to talk to mediums all the time to get read up. People fortune telling. Our society is very superstitious and it's okay. And especially with the scamming, a lot of people are actually involved in guard rings, talking about how powerful it is and how it can protect you. These are very close to home. But for some person, and it's interesting that the persons that, I thought about some persons when I went through this one. Breaking the Sabbath. Death penalty.
Oh, yes.
And some people who need to hear it are not here, incidentally. The death penalty for breaking the Sabbath. I know it's funny about this one. Sometimes when I talk to people about the Sabbath, they said Moses was very barbaric.
Moses.
Barbaric. As in, yeah.
Moses.
Yeah. In Exodus 31:12-17, it says, and the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Now, I want to point out that this is not Moses saying this.
It's God saying it.
This is God. So why Moses always get a bad rap? False witnesses. Oh, I love God, but that Moses is a bad guy. No. 17. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. It's a memorial. It is something that is supposed to focus in mind and meditate on God and his ways. Breaking the Sabbath is a death penalty. So if you go and get up and jump up in the arms and say, the adulterer must die. What about the Sabbath keeper? Who break the Sabbath? Numbers 15, Sabbath again. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been made clear what should be done to him. And the Lord said to Moses, notice, it's not Moses saying this. The Lord is saying this. They found him, and although they got the command that he should die, they were hesitant. They still don't know what to do. And God says, then the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So for those of us who think that breaking the Sabbath is something that we can do just because we are not experiencing death today, it is on the same level as adultery. You're breaking the Sabbath. The blasphemer.
Oh yes, that's what it's showing.
Leviticus 24, 10 to 16. An Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel fought in the camp. Verse 11. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. Then they brought him to Moses. Verse 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, bring out of the camp the one who cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands. Notice the witnesses. All who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. Blaspheme the name of God. Blaspheme the name and cursed. The two Hebrew words there. We won't spend a lot of time. But blaspheme means to pierce, to perforate, to bore. So basically, tearing down the name of God. And cursed, it means to abate, to make light of, to be slight, to be trifling. So when you talk about blaspheming God and his name, your behavior, how you reference him, what you say about him, leads to death. So that is what the full list looks like. I mean, I can share my PowerPoint, you'll have the full list. They're not the only things we should pay attention to, but my point is, the death penalty associated with these things should give us some immediate wake-up calls. Immediate. The moratorium. I think this is one of the things that has changed the world in terms of how Christianity is viewed. Jesus came and implemented a moratorium on the death penalty. In John 8:11, there's a woman caught in adultery, and Jesus forgave her and said, go, sin no more. By law, she should have really died.
Law was clear.
Brought in a moratorium. Romans 6, Paul says, for the wage of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ our Lord. A moratorium.
Yes, good point. Good point.
Moratorium don't mean it is gone. A price has to be paid. Pride has to be paid. So just because some of us don't drop down dead right now, don't mean that you don't have to pay the price at some point.
Don't repent.
If you continue, There is a judgment coming. So although we have a moratorium, it's not a license to continue sinning. We know that if you develop a lifestyle of sinning, it's going to be a problem. I have a question, especially for Elder Hendricks and Elder Ramakon. Is the church too lenient with members for other deadly sins that are being performed? 1 Corinthians 5, Paul says it's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that is not tolerated even among the pagans. Now listen to this. For a man have his father's wife. Remember, we looked at that earlier, and it was a death penalty. And Paul put out the man. So the question I have, is the church too lenient? What about the people who break the Sabbath on a regular basis? But you can put them out. Paul did not say you should kill the man who had the father's wife. He said put out the people. So my question is, if these things are equal to the death penalty and the people get put out, should we also put out people who consistently break the Sabbath? What about rebellious sons and daughters?
Put them out of the house.
I'm kind of sorry here.
What
What about people who are comfortable going to talk to mediums and come and tell us about it?
is a medium?
Somebody who talks to the dead is a medium between the dead. Open man. No, I say. I don't want to see it too plain. What about them? Should you suspend? Should you put them out? What about people who come and tell us that them dream things and God talk to them and it don't come true? No, let's ask. What about the unmarried girl who is having sex? What about that? Is the church too lenient? Because here's my thought. We have seen what leniency leads to, you know. We've seen it. We see the world. We see it. True. Hold on. No, hold on. But hold on. Hold on. Whitaker says, hold on. No. As much as I'm laughing, you know. It's a very serious thing that he has said, you know. Because if he is saying that we are too lenient and we are blind these things and nobody don't live in the church, the whole of we here just sitting down playing church, it means none of us not going to go to the kingdom.
Hold on.
It's all right. Question and answer. We'll leave with that. Question and answer. So, spiritual death is inevitable without repentance if we don't change our ways. It will require eternal separation from God. The second death, lake of fire.
Yes.
So while God's mercy delays immediate consequences, the reality of the judgment still stands. Hebrews 10 says if you go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sin, but a fearful expectation of judgment.
That's clear.
Brethren, we have 2 holidays coming up. The Feast of Trumpets.
10 days time.
The trumpet blast usually calls for a call to attention, a call to war, or an alarm for impending judgment. We're supposed to have a more blowing trumpets and a holy convocation. And it's a reminder that in the future, Jesus is coming back with a judgment. So I urge all people to reflect on their lives. There is a judgment that is coming. And as Elder Ramakon once said, your judgment might come today, Because you might die today. And there's no more opportunity for you to change. So don't bank on the assurance that tomorrow is sure.
No, tomorrow is not sure.
And second after that, we have the Day of Atonement. Fasting and repentance and a reflection on the sacrifice of the Messiah for our sins. And we are sinful people. The good thing is that we have time to change and to repent. Today's objective was to examine the death penalty from a biblical perspective, identify sins that resulted in death penalty, and consider the spiritual implications of each type of sin. We want to discuss how the death penalty is still applicable today for Christians, and it spiritually still is. And if there's one thing that you should take from this presentation, while God's mercy delays immediate consequences, the reality of judgment still stands.